My mother destroyed my dream of being a writer for years, but when I got my novel published, she told me it was bad. I quit my job, and now she came back crying, begging for forgiveness. I'm 26 years old. I work in advertising, and what happened a few weeks ago with my mother basically made me question my entire life and my relationship with her. The truth is, I need to tell this because I'm still processing it. You know, trying to understand how we got to this point where she literally told me she doesn't think I'm a good writer after I finally, after years of trying, got my novel published. But I guess I should start from the beginning, from when all of this really started. I've been writing for as long as I can remember, literally. My dad, Nicholas, gave me my first journal when I was like 8 years old, and I haven't stopped since. He always supported me, bought me books whenever he could, read to me before bed, and when I told him at 19 that I was writing a novel, he said he was proud of me, to keep going. My mom, Andrea, well, she's a completely different story. She's 48. She's a managing director at a consulting firm, and she grew up in absolute poverty, like her family didn't even have enough to eat some days. So for her, financial stability is everything. You know what I mean? And sure, I understand that. I really do. But that doesn't make it easier when your whole life you've been made to feel like what you love doing is worthless. I studied literature in college because it was the only thing I was passionate about, but my mom made it very clear that was a hobby, not a real career. She'd say things like, "It's fine that you like reading and writing, Rebecca, but you need something that'll put food on the table." And so I got this job in advertising when I graduated like 4 years ago, a decent job that pays the bills, but that leaves me completely empty inside. Every day I sit at that desk, writing copy for products I don't care about, while my novel waits for me at home. And it's exhausting, honestly. But I kept writing, you know? Every night after work, every weekend, every free moment I had, I dedicated to this story I'd been building. Since I was 19, my dad died 2 years ago from a sudden heart attack. He was only like 52, was in perfect health according to everyone, and one day he just collapsed in his office and never woke up. It was devastating, obviously, but what I didn't expect was how alone I was going to feel without him, especially when it came to my writing. He was literally the only person who asked me how the novel was going, who read my drafts, who encouraged me when I felt like it was going nowhere. After he died, my mom got even more intense with her criticism, I guess because there was no one left to counter her. Every Wednesday we have a family dinner at her house. It's like our tradition from forever. And every damn Wednesday it was the same thing. Still wasting time on that novel? When are you going to focus on your real career? Why don't you look for a promotion at the agency? I'd been sending my manuscript to publishers for 3 years. 3 years of rejections, of letters saying, "Thank you, but it's not what we're looking for right now," of complete silence from some publishers who didn't even bother to respond. After each rejection, my mom would give me that look. You know, the one that says, "I told you so," without having to say it out loud. And I took it because what else could I do? Like, she's my mother, and I love her, even though sometimes it's hard to remember why. But like 2 months ago, I made a decision. I was going to send my manuscript to this specific publisher that had always been like my absolute dream. And if they rejected me, I was going to give it up. I was going to accept that maybe my mom was right, and I should focus on my career in advertising and forget about being a writer. I sent the manuscript on a Monday morning, and the longest weeks of my life passed waiting for a response. My mom didn't even know I'd sent it because why tell her? I already knew exactly what she was going to say. And then one day, I think it was Thursday or Friday, I don't remember exactly. I was at work checking emails when I saw one from the publisher. I completely froze. Literally felt like my heart stopped beating for a second, and I couldn't open it. I went to the bathroom, locked myself in a stall, and opened the email there. "Dear Rebecca, we are pleased to inform you that we have decided to publish your novel." I read that line like 10 times because I couldn't believe it was real, that after years of trying, someone had finally said yes, that my work was worthwhile, that I was going to be published. I cried in that work bathroom like I hadn't cried since my dad died, but they were tears of happiness, of relief, of validation. The first thing I thought was that I had to tell my dad, and then I remembered I couldn't, and that hurt so much. But I also thought he would have known somehow, that he would be proud. I left the bathroom, talked to my boss, and told him I was feeling sick and needed to leave. Total lie, obviously, and I went. Straight home to celebrate alone because I didn't have anyone else to tell at that moment. I decided I was going to tell my mom the following Wednesday at dinner, that I was going to arrive and surprise her with the news, and that finally, after all these years of her criticizing me and belittling my dream, she was going to have to admit that I was right, that I could do it. Wednesday came, and I was nervous, but excited. Like I had literally practiced in my head how I was going to tell her. I had the acceptance letter printed in my bag because the publisher had also sent a physical letter to my house, confirming everything. I guess it's more official that way or something. I got to my mom's house at 7, like always. She was in the kitchen preparing dinner, and everything seemed normal. We sat down to eat, and we were making the typical superficial small talk about work and the weather and stuff like that, and I was waiting for the perfect moment to tell her. But then, out of nowhere, she got up and went to her study, and came back with an envelope in her hand. My envelope. The letter from the publisher. Turns out they'd sent it to her address first, because at some point when I filled out the initial form years ago, I put her address as an alternative. E didn't even remember that, honestly. And there she was with my letter. Unopened, but obviously she knew what publisher it was from because the logo was on the outside. She looked at me and said, "Another rejection," I assume, with that tone of voice she always used, like somewhere between disappointed and condescending. And I just sat there, not knowing what to say because I didn't expect this. Didn't expect her to already know. But what happened next was worse. She put the letter on the table and started with her usual speech, that I needed to grow up and accept reality, that not everyone can be a writer, that life isn't like in the movies. And then she said something that left me frozen. "Rebecca, if you're thinking it's about quitting your job to dedicate yourself full-time to this, I need you to know that I'm not going to support you financially. I'm not going to watch you throw your life away. If you decide to do that stupid thing, consider yourself alone. Don't count on me for anything." She was basically threatening to cut me off completely, assuming I was going to leave my job, which I hadn't even considered at that moment, to be honest. I felt something explode inside me. 3 years of rejections, of putting up with her comments, of feeling inadequate, of doubting myself, all of that came out in that moment. I got up from the chair so fast I knocked it over, grabbed the envelope from the table, opened it dramatically, like, I literally tore the paper because I was shaking with rage, took out the letter and put it in front of her face. "Read it," I told her. Or more like, I yelled at her. "Read it, and then tell me again that I'm throwing my life away." She took the letter with a confused face, and I started reading, and I watched her expression change as she realized what it said. It was almost comical if it wasn't so painful, you know? Watching her realize she'd assumed the worst of me, that she'd been there threatening me and lecturing me when actually I had just achieved something incredible. When she finished reading, she looked up and said, "Rebecca, this is wonderful. Congratulations." But she said it with such a flat voice, so lacking in real emotion, that it was almost worse than if she hadn't said anything. And then she tried to take it back. Said she hadn't meant what she said before, that obviously she supported me, but I couldn't take it anymore. I told her exactly what I'd been holding back for years, that she'd never believed in me, that she'd always assumed I was going to fail, that she hadn't even had the decency to open the letter before judging me, that in all these years of writing, she hadn't asked me once what my novel was about or why it was important to me. I told her that Dad had been the only one who truly supported me, and that since he died, I'd felt completely alone, that she'd made the biggest achievement of my life feel empty because I knew she didn't even care. She just sat there saying nothing, and I grabbed my stuff and left. I drove back to my apartment crying the whole way, like I couldn't even see the road properly. And when I got there, I threw myself on my bed and cried myself to sleep. The next day, she started sending me messages, apologizing, saying she'd reacted badly, that she was happy for me, but I didn't respond. I couldn't. Every time I saw her messages, I felt that rage again. That frustration from years of not feeling good enough for her. Like 2 weeks went by like that, with her sending me messages almost every day and me completely ignoring her. My aunts, my mom's sisters, started calling me too, telling me to give her a chance, that she came from a different generation where financial security was all that mattered, that I didn't understand how hard it had been for her to get out of poverty. And yeah, I mean, I understood all that, but at what point did that justify making me feel so bad about myself for so long? I sent her a message saying I needed space, that I wasn't ready to talk to her. But honestly, I was feeling more and more lonely. Not having my mom at this moment that should be the happiest of my life was horrible, even though she was the reason I felt that way in the first place. The publisher sent me the contract and all the information about the publishing process, the tentative dates, the cover design, everything. And I was excited, obviously. But I also felt weird celebrating alone, without being able to share it with anyone in my family. My friends were happy for me, sure, but it wasn't the same. I kept thinking about my dad, about how he would be organizing a dinner or something to celebrate, buying cheap champagne and making a long emotional toast. My mom kept sending messages, increasingly desperate. And finally, after like a month, I told her we could meet to talk. We met at a neutral coffee shop, not at her house or mine, because I needed it to be somewhere I could leave easily if things went bad. She arrived on time. She's always on time. It's something I inherited from her, even though I don't want to admit it, and she looked tired, like she had dark circles and you could tell she hadn't been sleeping well. She apologized again, told me she'd been thinking a lot about what I said, that I was right that she hadn't been supportive, that she was going to try to do better. And I wanted to believe her. I really did. But there was something in her tone that made me doubt, like she was saying what she thought I wanted to hear more than what she really felt. I asked her directly, "Have you ever read anything I've written?" And she was quiet for a moment too long before admitting that no, that she'd tried to read some pages my dad had given her years ago, but she hadn't understood it, that my writing style was too difficult for her. And then she said something that honestly destroyed me more than everything she'd said before. "Rebecca, the truth is I don't think you're a good writer. I don't understand your work. It seems confusing and pretentious to me. And yes, I'm glad someone sees value in it, but I don't see it. And I'm not saying this to hurt you. I'm being honest because you asked me to be honest." I'd spent the last month angry at her for not supporting me, but deep down I'd had this hope that maybe when she read my work she'd finally understand it, finally see why it was so important to me. But she'd basically just told me that not only did she not support me, she actively thought my work was bad. She didn't just not believe I was going to succeed. She believed I didn't deserve to succeed. I got up from the table without saying anything else, and when I got to my car, I started crying hysterically, like I couldn't even breathe properly. I cried all the way home. I cried in the shower. I cried until my throat hurt and I couldn't anymore. The next few days were blurry. Honestly, I went to work and did the bare minimum, came home and stayed in bed staring at the ceiling. The publisher had sent me more documents to review, but I couldn't even look at them without getting anxious. I kept hearing my mom's voice telling me my work was pretentious, that I wasn't good, and I started doubting everything. What if the publisher had made a mistake? What if they published my book and it was a total failure? What if my mom was right and I'd been wasting my time all these years? We didn't talk for like 2 weeks after that, and in that time I made a decision. I quit my job in advertising. I know it sounds impulsive, and it probably was, but I couldn't keep being there, pretending I cared about writing copy about detergent when I'd achieved my dream of being published, and my own mother thought it was a farce. I had enough savings to live for like 6 months without work, and the publisher had given me a small but decent advance. So I thought, you know what? I'm going to take the risk. I'm going to dedicate myself full-time to writing. I'm going to start my second novel. And if it fails, at least I'll have really tried. I didn't tell my mom, obviously, but eventually she called me and we had an awkward conversation where she tried to fix things again, and I don't know why, just blurted it out. I quit my job. The silence on the other end of the phone was deafening. Then she started with the questions. How are you going to pay your bills? What are you going to do for health insurance? Have you thought this through? And I told her yes, that I'd thought about it, that it was my decision and I didn't need her approval. She went quiet again and then said she had to hang up, that we'd talk later. She hung up and I felt worse than ever, but also liberated in a way, like I'd finally taken control of my life, even though it was terrifying. Yesterday, completely unexpected, she showed up at my apartment. She hadn't warned me she was coming. She just knocked on my door at 9 a.m. on a Saturday. I opened in my pajamas, confused and half asleep, and she was there with red eyes, like it was obvious she'd been crying. She asked if she could come in, and I didn't know what to do, but I let her in. She sat on my couch and started crying. Not that delicate crying people sometimes do, but really crying, sobbing and shaking. She told me she was sorry, that she'd been a terrible mother, that she was so focused on me being financially secure that she never stopped to ask herself if I was happy. She told me she'd been thinking a lot about my dad, about how he'd always supported me without questioning, and that she'd been jealous of that relationship. That's why she'd been so hard on me. She said that when he died, she lost the opportunity to learn from him how to be a better mother, and that now she realized she was losing me too. She admitted that maybe she wasn't good at judging literature, that her comment about my writing had been cruel and unnecessary, that she'd said it because she was scared I'd end up with nothing. But that now she understood that having something meant nothing if I was miserable, that she'd rather see me chasing my dream even if it was risky, than watching me die slowly in a job I hated. I started crying too because it was everything I'd wanted to hear for years, and it was so late and so painful but also necessary. I told her I didn't need her to understand my writing or like my work. I just needed her to trust that I knew what I was doing with my life, to believe in me even if she didn't understand why I did what I did. She nodded and hugged me, and it was the first time we'd really hugged since my dad died. Like not one of those awkward obligatory hugs, but a real hug where we were both crying and holding on to each other. We talked for hours after that. I told her what my novel was about. It's about a woman who loses her father and has to navigate her complicated relationship with her mother. Ironically, I explained why writing was so important to me, how it made me feel alive in a way nothing else did. She told me about her childhood, about how she'd sworn her children would never go through what she went through, how that fear had consumed her so much she couldn't see anything else. She told me she wanted to try to read my novel when it came out, that maybe she wouldn't understand it completely, but she'd try because she loved me and because it was important to me. We decided we were going to go to therapy together, like family therapy, to work on our relationship in a healthy way with someone who could guide us. She agreed immediately, which surprised me, because my mom has always been one of those people who think therapy is for weak people. Yeah, I know, very much her generation. But she said she'd do whatever was necessary to fix things between us, and I believe her. Or at least I want to believe her. And that's enough for now. I'm not going to lie and say everything's perfect now because it's not. There are still moments where I feel resentment, where I remember all the times she made me feel small and inadequate. I still miss my dad constantly and wonder what all of this would be like if he were alive. But for the first time in years, I feel like my mom and I have a chance to build something real, something honest. We start therapy next week, and I'm nervous but also hopeful. My novel comes out in 6 months. The publisher sent me the final cover design last week, and it's beautiful, better than I'd imagined. I'm working on my second novel, and although it's hard and there are days where I doubt every word I write, I'm doing it. I sent my mom a photo of the cover, and she responded saying she was proud of me. And even though I know we still have a lot of work to do on our relationship, that message made me cry, happy tears this time. I don't know what the future will be like, if my career as a writer is going to work long-term, or if I'm going to have to go back to looking for work in advertising eventually. But for the first time in a long time, I feel like I'm where I should be, doing what I should be doing, and my mom is finally trying to understand it. And that, I guess, is really all I needed.